Okay, great, thank you.
Okay, so I think we should take these minutes one at a time because I know that there were some concerns with a couple of them. And I know that some of them were before the new board and some of them were after. So let's see what we're taking care of here. Sorry, I just lost the video. Okay, so a motion on the February 10th minutes.
April, and I would like a motion that we table the vote on the February 10th and March 3rd minutes, and I apologize. I did carve out time to address those today, but my little people did not respect my time.
Okay, can I get a second to table February 10th and March 3rd for one more meeting?
This is Amy. Can I make a comment?
I'm sorry, I missed that, Amy.
Can I make a comment? I'm concerned with these not being voted and approved because I think the practice is or made available to the public. They're getting a little bit old at this point.
I agree. I think folks that can vote on these ones are Jean and April and myself, since we're the only ones that were there. So if April's not prepared, I don't think that we can really take action on them. But I definitely understand and share your concern.
Indeed, this is April, and I'd just like to say that I'm having difficulty hearing Amy tonight. She's going in and out. And I would like to hear what she has to say.
And I can repeat, she was just concerned with the age of the February 10th and March 3rd meeting minutes, so that we can get them posted in an official capacity. Somebody's got some pretty funky background noise too. Am I the only one hearing that?
No, I hear it also.
I hear it.
Hear it.
So if everyone can mute, yeah.
Can you mute all of us, Patty? Okay, that definitely fixed it. I don't know if board members want to mute or unmute rather one at a time to see if we can pin it down, or if you just want to kind of go like this for a little bit.
It seems to be gone.
Cool. Okay, so I think we have a motion to table February 10th and March 3rd. I guess, Jean, I need a second, I think, from you if we're going to go ahead and do that.
Yeah, if April's not prepared, we don't have a quorum, so therefore it has to be tabled.
Okay, so roll call vote, all in favor of the motion to table February 10th and March 3rd, unless there's discussion.
Aye, Jean.
Thank you, Amy.
Abstain.
Thank you, Ann.
Yes.
And April.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. Sandy, Amy abstained. I'm not sure if you heard that or not. So then moving on to March 17th minutes. I think there were some revisions requested on this one the last time around. Or can I get a motion first, I guess, before, and then we'll discuss.
Motion to approve March 17th. This is Jean.
Dan, second.
Thank you. Discussion on the March 17th minutes. Okay, hearing none. On a roll call vote, Amy?
I'm sorry, Andy, I have a question for you.
Sure.
I know that we had non-public also, so I don't see a copy of the non-public minutes. to approve? Is that something this,
Patty, do you want to explain that? You probably can do it more eloquently than I can. You're muted, Patty.
So when we come out of non-public, we talk about the general discussion of what was discussed in non-public. There are no detailed minutes. If the minutes are sealed, it will be indicated in the minutes, and those obviously would not be brought forward for approval.
okay, my question is that for selectmen, we vote on the non-public minutes. So I just didn't know if the school did or not.
They're part, if they're not sealed, they're part of the public minutes. So I'm trying to flip to where it would be.
Well, even sealed, don't you need to keep a copy of them for a length of time and then unseal them?
We typically designate how long they will be sealed. So if a board member wants them sealed for a month or until a fixed date and time, otherwise they stay sealed.
But if the question I have is that if the board doesn't vote on it, then how do you know that that was what happened in that minute for that meeting?
That's a great question. So the advice that we received several years ago was that if you bring the sealed minutes forward for discussion, you're in effect unsealing them. So if you do that differently, that's interesting and maybe worth pursuing and getting clarification. But that's how we've operated for as long as I can remember.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that I wasn't missing something.
No, and I think, and maybe if this helps, and I think there should be a note in the meeting minutes, at least stating that we voted to seal the non-public minutes. So if that entry's not there, it probably should be. But yeah, I think as long as that line is in there saying that we've sealed them, then I think we'd have to go. We've never put a time on it in the time that I've been on the board, so I think we'd have to vote to unseal those minutes at a time in the future if we decided to do that.
This is April, and I just have a concern about if the board has not actually reviewed sealed minutes and actually approved those, are we really, when we approve the minutes that are presented to us, which are public minutes, is the assumption that we're also approving non-public minutes, which we were never presented to review? And that's a real concern to me.
I can take a note and ask for clarification from the School Board Association on the proper way to handle non-public minutes, and I can bring that back to the next meeting if that will help.
Thank you.
Andy, this is Amy. I have a question.
Sure.
So with respect to the 317 minutes, is that what we're looking at here? Hold on. Yeah, with respect to the 317 minutes, can Patty or you clarify, is there any other minutes for the 317 meeting other than the minutes that are 10 pages long that were included in the board packet?
I'm having a little trouble hearing you, but Patty, I think she's asking, are there any other minutes than what was included in the board packet?
I don't believe so for March 17th.
Thank you.
So I think we had a motion to accept. I think we had a second. There's no further discussion. Sorry. Jean. Lose Jean.
Can you hear me?
Amy? Yep, got it. Thank you. April?
Yes.
Thank you, Anne.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. So March 13th, or I'm sorry, March 17th minutes approved. And last but not least, April 21st minutes. Can I get a motion before we discuss?
I'll make a motion to accept the minutes for April 21st.
Thank you. Can I get a second?
Second, Gene.
That's Ed and Jean. Is there discussion regarding the 421 minutes?
Hi, this is April. I would like to report an inaccuracy in the roll call on the first page of those minutes. It does not reflect that I was in attendance, so that means those minutes are inaccurate. I also don't feel that it's fair that we get these minutes. I saw that these minutes were updated yesterday. We have less than 48 hours to review a 25-page document. I don't know if each one of you since yesterday has sat down and really reviewed these minutes for 25 pages. That is a concern that I have. Thank you.
Sure, and I would agree, and I think, last meeting was longer than normal. And so that document is clearly bigger than normal, and I certainly, it would not concern me at all to approve those a week later if we've only got a day or two to review something that long. I don't think that's a problem whatsoever. Like we said, the other ones are getting kind of old from February and March, and I think we need to do what we can to do these in a timely fashion so that the public can see them in their final form. But I agree, last meeting was a lot to go through. So if people are not prepared, that's okay. Any other
Motion to table?
discussion?
Do a motion to table, Andy?
Did we have a motion on the floor already? I
We
think
had a
we did.
motion to approve.
So, do we need to vote on that first then?
We can vote to table it, make a motion to table it.
Okay, so Gene made a motion to table. Is there a second?
Dan second.
All right. Any more discussion? Okay, so on a roll call vote to table the meeting minutes from 421. Can't remember what order I went in. Let's go, Gene.
Yes.
Ann,
Yes.
April,
Yes.
Amy,
Can you please clarify if a unanimous vote is needed to carry the motion to table?
it is not. This is a majority vote to table the minutes.
Thank you. I'm a no.
And I'm also a no. So the motion to table carries. And we'll move on. So agenda item 3, immediate business, section A, the first public comment section. I have a whole lot of people in the chat that typed their name in there, and I can't tell for sure if they were typing their name just to be able to change their name or if they're typing their name because they have something to say. So what I'm going to do, the list is not that long. I'm going to go down one by one. I will say the names in the order that I see them. If I say your name and you have something that you would like to say, please unmute yourself and we'll have a listen and we'll just move through the list. I'll remind everybody, there's not a ton of people on, but there are enough that I should remind it that this is held to 15 minutes. So if you've got a comment, please keep it brief. And with that, I will ask Joy Klein.
Sandy.
If you, sorry, Sandy, yes?
People to put their name in the chat for attendance. So that might be part of the reason. So if anybody else has joined in, that would be helpful for attendance.
Okay, so that makes a lot more sense. So instead of going one by one then, I will pause for a moment, and if you'd like to add something to public comment, if you could please just type something in the chat right now, and I will recognize you in the order that I see you. All right, so Robert, if you want to go ahead.
Yeah, I've just got a concern. I've been visiting the website, which is supposed to be updated, and currently I wrote to the two superintendents about this, but the most current update from our SAU says that schools should be returning on April 6th, I believe it is. I did notice that it was, so now we've got the governor's orders linked to there, but I'm looking at other SAUs that are coming out with all sorts of cool things and notices and letters from the superintendents, and ours is really out of date. So it just concerns me that if we were to use the SAU as our source of information, it's not accurate at all.
Okay. Thank you. We can certainly send a note and have somebody take a look at that. Let's see, next on the list is Carrie Dean.
Andy, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I just wanted to express a little bit of frustration. This is the second meeting in a row that April has requested to not review minutes. And I know I have a lot of people who are asking to be able to see those minutes because there are meetings that they haven't been able to attend. They'd like to know what was going on. It's getting really frustrating for a lot of people. We're all very busy, and I'm sorry. I don't mean to attack one person, but it's getting really frustrating because it's the same excuse every time that there's not enough time to review these minutes. We really need to be able to see these minutes as the public, and we're always talking about specifically board members are talking about how they want to be transparent and get as much information out, and then we're faced with the same thing every meeting. So I would really appreciate it if by next meeting all of these minutes are reviewed and including the minutes from tonight, and so we can get them up on the SAU website. That's all. Thank you.
Thanks. So Ann, is that you?
Yes. I
Ann, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask to back on Carrie. Has the SAU, or excuse me, has the Pembroke School Board ever thought of just putting up a draft of their minutes? I know a lot of districts do, so I just thought maybe that might help. But I do have a couple of things. Dave Joden did call in, so he's currently on the line now in case we have any discussion about the letter number 3D. So David Joden's on the line in case Amber or Patty have questions, or the school board, concerning the discussion that we had with them April 21st. But I also have a letter here from Jerry Fleury, the vice chair of the budget committee. And I believe he sent this to all of the school board members on April 24th. So I don't think it's attached to this meeting. So I thought if you will allow me to take 2 minutes and read it out loud.
Sure.
After attending the school board meeting Tuesday evening and listening to the discussion on budgets and revenues, it seems clear that the property owners everywhere, and certainly in Pembroke, may be in for a shock of their lives when they get the fall tax bills. With revenues declining, double digits, and property taxes being in the balancing act, when DRA sets the rate next fall, it is sure to make heads spin. Short-term cash flows appear to be an issue, and if that translates into borrowing in anticipation of taxes, it will also excavate the situation. Spending freezes may help to mitigate the problem, but I doubt that it will prove to be a solution. If things play out as badly as they appear they might, taxpayers should be alerted to this no later than midsummer so that they have the luxury of time to plan for the probable big tax bill. I'm not sure what the role of the budget committee will be with all of this because our recommendation in better times only to have it ignored. Nevertheless, the lack of proactive stance could weigh badly on the committee and be a disservice to our taxpayers. Do we need to plan a public announcement? If so, who should issue it? When should it be said, and when should it be sent out? Jerry Fleury, Vice Chair, Pembroke Budget Committee. Thank you.
Thank you. I've got a couple of responses for you, Ann, but I'll wait till we get down to the budget section in the agenda. Let's see. Jen Dorr just for attendance. Amy saying about being able to hear. I don't see anyone else waiting for public comment. I'll give it 30, 45 seconds and see if anybody pops up before we move on. Oh, April has a question.
Hi, this is April. I received an email and I did not see that email from Mr. Flurry. I don't know if other board members received it, but would it be possible to ask Ann to forward that to our superintendent and share it to all of it, with all of us?
Sure, and if you, Kathy Sutphin is in charge of dropping things in the drive for us. So if you want to forward a copy of that email to Kathy, she can include it in the drive for next time around. I mean, that'll go up soon.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ann.
All right, not seeing any other members of the public in the chat. We will move on to agenda item 3B. We've got one consent agenda item, Patty. Patty muted?
Yes, sorry. We have a request that's been an annual request for some time for a staff member's child to enroll in the Pembroke School District. I did attach the policy with the email. Then the title of the policy is GCBD, Enrollment of Staff's Children. And the policy indicates that it needs to come before the board each year and that there is a tuition payment of $3,600 made by the staff member exclusive of transportation and any other ancillary expenses. So this student has been enrolled since middle school and is currently at Pembroke Academy.
Andy, this is Amy.
Yep.
I'd like to make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second before we discuss?
Second.
That's Jean. Thank you. Discussion?
Andy, this is Ann. I have, I guess, quite a few questions. What is the amount of cost to educate our Pembroke resident student?
Do you have a tuition number?
The cost per pupil, I do not have it with me. I'm not sure if Amber might have it.
I can get. I'm thinking back to my budget talk, and I want to say it's around 13 and change, but I can't remember for certain. It is certainly significantly more than the 3,600 that's in this policy.
Right. So who makes up the additional 10,000?
I think, we talk about cost per pupil being a division of the budget and the number of students that we have. When you're talking about one student, you're not going to lose another $10,000 by only accepting $3,600 for one student, because you wouldn't have a change in staff or supplies or any of those related costs.
But if
also,
go ahead.
I was just going to say, I think it would be somewhat mitigated, certainly not to a significant degree, but it'd be somewhat mitigated because the price per pupil is a division of all costs. And as Patty mentioned, there's no transportation. We don't bus those kids from, if this is a teacher of ours that lives in wherever, their kid is going to ride in with them. We don't have to send a bus to get them and that sort of thing. So I'm sure it's not the full amount.
But it's more than 3,600.
Yes.
I'm just saying, is it the Pembroke taxpayers that pay up the difference? Because if my child lives in school, it's costing us about $15,000 to educate them. But if you bring in a child non-district, we owe $600. So to me, it sounds like the Pembroke residents would be picking up the difference.
I think, and I could be wrong, Patty, Amber, correct me if I'm wrong. I think that I would agree with that if they were at Hill or TRS. If I'm doing this right in my head, that difference would be spread out across the whole PA budget since they're a PA kid. So really, I think the Pembroke taxpayers would be picking up the slack for the 36% or whatever of that difference. And technically the other towns would have a little tiny piece of that as well.
The second question I have is that right now, the teacher does not have a school choice. So be able to send my child to a different district because I don't have school choice. So with policy GCBD, basically that's saying that we're allowing school choice.
You were kind of cutting in and out there, Ann, but I think I got the gist of it. Again, Patty, Amber, correct me if I say something incorrect here. I believe Pembroke is what's referred to as an open school, so we have the option to accept anybody that wants to come here. I think the school choice rules that are often talked about at the state level are more for not necessarily public schools. They're for charter schools and things like that. Patty, can you talk a little more about like what choice a parent has, I mean, across the state really, on where they send their kid to school?
Sure. There's an RSA that allows a parent to apply for any public school. And as Ann mentioned, there's a cost per pupil attached to that. This school board policy has been in effect for quite a number of years, and it's a benefit that's given to staff. Sometimes it's a benefit that's negotiated into the collective bargaining agreement. In this case, it's a benefit that is incorporated into a school board policy. So it's certainly something, you know, that the board can review in the future as a policy if that's something that you wanted to discuss. The thing that I would mention with this student is that this has been approved year after year. So I think I would just caution that you take into consideration that this student has had his academic career through the Pembroke school system, and that if this request were denied, we would be asking a child to transfer to another district towards the end of his school career.
Sorry, go ahead, Ann.
Is there a way to ask the sending district to pick up the difference instead of just the 3,600?
There's always a way to ask. I'm not sure that the district would have any motivation, because if someone sent me a letter asking me to pay the difference in tuition to another school district, that's not something I would approve, given that the rest would come from the Pembroke taxpayers. So it's, you know, if the board wants me to write a letter, I'm happy to write a letter if that's the wish of the board.
I think it's also important to consider a couple of things. One, it's entirely possible that we have staff or we have people that live in Pembroke and teach somewhere else and take their child with them to that school district and pay that tuition piece. So that's you know, that person would still be paying Pembroke taxes. So in that way, it probably kind of washes out if it's only a student or two here and there. I certainly can't prove that we have anybody doing that, but if we're taking in one student at some, you know, $8,000–9,000 loss, if you want to call it that, if we have one person in town that works somewhere else and therefore tuitions their child out to somewhere else, then that would wash. I think the second part for me is this is a benefit for our teachers. I think that this is a policy, and I could be wrong, but I believe this is a policy that most schools have or similar. And I have a real hard time, you know, paring down the benefits that we offer to our faculty and staff, because that just incentivizes them to work in a district that gives them better benefits. I guess the thing I would like a little clarification on, Patty, if you can speak to it, as far as the policy, does this policy right now say that we allow teachers to do this, or does the policy just specify what the dollar amount is if we approve it?
It gives permission for them to apply to enroll and request that it come before the board each year, and states that when it's approved, there's a charge of $3,600 for the staff member.
This is April. I would like to bring a point of clarification that the policy is not limited to our educators. It actually, the verbiage does say for Pembroke District staff. So that means an employee. You don't have to be an educator to take advantage of this current policy.
Sure. Thank you.
I'll have
April
to be
again. Go ahead, Gina. Wait.
Oh, sorry. Amber had posted earlier the total cost of education for a student at Pembroke is 12,823 in the chat earlier. Also, I've got to agree with Andy. It is a benefit for a staff member to be able to, partially tuition in their child here. Help with staff retention also. So it's viewed as a benefit, and yeah, open to all Pembroke School District staff. Many colleges operate the same way.
Anything else? I'm going to specifically ask Amy if she has any questions because she's tough to hear, so I want to give her a chance to sneak in here.
Trying to reconfigure my setup here a little bit. I figured out where my mic is. I'm going to be voting in favor of approving this person. I think we have to honor our family approved. Here, I see you saying you still can't hear me. I don't know what else to say. I'm going to vote to approve.
Thank you. Any other discussion before we take a vote?
This is April. I have another question. Also, just for the record, I'm still having difficulty hearing Amy, and I think it's important that we're able to hear each other in the discussion. So my question is about, I clearly hear and I understand what our superintendent is telling us, that sure, per the policy, it says that we can seek the balance of the tuition from the resident school district, but they have no obligation to pay. Can we request, do things change if we request that school district to release their, I don't know the correct verbiage, but if they consent to the child in their district to attend a Pembroke school, which is out of district, and if they may be more obligated to reimburse for the remainder of the tuition cost?
Patty, did you get that?
I'm
I want to
sorry.
clarify, sorry, Patty, before you go. I say clarify, I guess clarify for myself. The $3,600 is not paid by the sending school district, it's paid by the family, is that correct?
Yes.
So then I think, April, correct me if I've got this wrong, just to relay the question for Patty and Sandy. I think April's question is basically if the sending school or the school that the child would attend approves the transfer, and we were to write them a letter requesting that money, would they have any sort of obligation to send us those funds? Was that the spirit of it, April?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I think I understand now. Thank you. So if the parent petitioned to the school board to ask them to approve the request for the child to go to another district, then yes, there could be the opportunity to recover some tuition if the other school board granted permission.
Thank you.
All right, if nobody's got anything else, on a roll call vote. Yeah, oh, I heard something. Sandy?
Yeah, so I just wanted to be sure that this reads right. So if it's the cost of per student is $12,823, the parent pays $3,600, technically or potentially the Pembroke residents would be paying the $9,223 for the rest of that tuition. Is that correct?
I think, and maybe Amber can speak to this, I think that because it's a PA student, we'd only be paying whatever our percentage of the PA cost is, which is 34, 36%, something like that. So I think you'd have to do a third. I think what would fall on Pembroke would be more like $3,000. But Amber, can you verify that would be divided up that way since they're at PA?
That is, they would just pay the Pembroke portion.
And the other 6,000 would be spread across Chichester, Epsom, Field, etc.
Correct, but that's still a fee left on the Pembroke residents. The only reason I'm asking, I'm going to vote yes for this particular student because like Patty said, they have come up through the whole time. But for transparency, what I know a lot of people are asking for, The residents want to know what they're paying, Pembroke residents, so that's the only reason I'm asking for clarification. Thank
I
you.
appreciate that, and I would, you know, if it's something that you have a particular concern about, and two, I would say that's probably, I guess that would, in my mind anyway, and people can disagree, that would fall under the category of something not urgent, but once things return to some sort of normalcy, if you want to put that on the agenda to discuss, to review that policy, we certainly can have that discussion.
Thank you.
Okay, so Amy has disconnected her computer audio and called in. So I will try to make an attempt each time to ask if you have any comments, Amy. For now, I think we've got a motion, we've got a second, we've had some discussion. I'll give it another 15, 20 seconds, see if anybody chimes in with further discussion before we go ahead and vote. Okay, on a roll call, Amy. We'll come back to you. Ann.
I vote yes on this one particular situation for this child because they have been through the Pembroke School District all of their education career.
Thank you. April?
Yes.
Thank you. Jean?
Yes.
Thank you. And we'll try Amy again. Is April or is Amy able to? Oh, I just heard a noise. Was that you, Amy? No. Patty, is everybody able to unmute themselves right now? You're muted, Patty.
I'm not used to that. Yes, they should be able to unmute themselves.
I'm gonna try to give Amy another minute. Then I don't mean to hold it up, but I think it's important to have everybody involved if we can.
I don't see her on the call list anymore. If she gets back on with her phone, I can try to unmute her on my end and see if that helps. But I don't see her at all now.
I heard a beep beep like somebody joined. Is that you, Amy?
I see a 496. I'm going to unmute and we'll see if it's Amy.
Okay, yes, can anyone
You
hear
are.
me?
I can hear you.
Oh my gosh. So can we just focus on me for 1 second? Was the issue when I was trying to say yes for that vote? Patty, did you have the 496 number muted?
Yes, everyone's muted when they come
Okay.
in, and I think I had to
Okay.
unmute you. I don't think you can do it yourself.
Okay, awesome. Then I'm going to try to use this so people can hear me. And I, again, apologize. Third time's the charm. So third time we do this, I'll have it all figured out.
Yeah, and so Amy, if there's, since you can't mute and unmute yourself on your cell phone, maybe, if you want to get my attention, do you still have your computer up? Can you drop a line in the chat if you need me, and then I'll just ask Patty to unmute you?
Yes, and also I will reconnect on my video, and if you don't see your chat, I'll wave.
Okay, perfect. So just to catch you up, I'm not sure how long you were off there, but we're in the middle of the vote to approve this item. And so I think we've got, actually I called on Ann was a yes, April was a yes, and I think you're up now.
Oh, great. I'm a yes.
Okay. And I think we already got Jean, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm a yes. We made it.
Hooray.
Okay. So moving on to agenda item 3C, food service distribution information and discussion. So I guess we'll start off, Patty, if it's you, or if Paul, whoever has the most up-to-date information on food service, want to jump in.
So we, Amber actually helped get a count on the meals, and we are serving right now an average of 100 meals per day, and which is fantastic. And I think the outstanding question from the last meeting was whether or not the board wanted to continue serving meals be on the last day of school. So I did alert our food service director that that may be something the board was interested in, and told her that that would be decided tonight because she would need to arrange to have her staff there as well as make sure they had enough supplies.
Okay, does anybody have any questions for Patty regarding food service?
Andy, this is Amy. So is it working?
Yep.
All right. I'm not sure if you're ready for a discussion, but I just wanted to share my thought that I would like us to vote to serve food through the end of what would have been the school year. I don't really know exactly when that is, but something like June 15th or June 17th is the neighborhood that I have in mind.
Okay, I think the original end date was June 12th, but I don't think any of us are certain about this at this point.
It was scheduled to be the 15th, and then we added 2 makeup days, so it would have been the 17th.
Okay, so was that an official motion, Amy?
No, it was more of discussion, just, I don't want to ask for something that's like really in the moving mountains or in the impossible category. So I guess I kind of wanted Patty's reaction and others with more experience than me, their reaction, to make sure this is in the realm of doable. And if we are in that realm, then, I'd be happy to make a motion or second a motion, what have you.
Okay, I'd like to piggyback on that before I turn it over to Patty. A question that I have about that, and I certainly don't want this to come across as insensitive, but I wonder, what do the finances of that look like? I don't know what the contract looks like with the food service department. Were they planning on working that long already? Is the food already pre-budgeted for those dates anyway, or is this going to represent some additional cost? And if it is an additional cost, how significant are we looking? If somebody can speak to that, I would be interested.
Sure. So the food service workers are budgeted for that amount to run through the end of the school year, so there wouldn't be any staffing increases. It's certainly something people around the state are concerned about because some of the summer food programs are either closing down or short-staffed or short on supplies, so people are unsure about what's going to happen over the summer for families. I think the Department of Education is also concerned enough that they actually extended the waiver through June for the USDA regulations, which if you have specific questions about that, we're going to have Amber answer them. But the gist and the answer to your question so far is that it's certainly a possibility and it is budgeted for.
Anybody else?
Andy, this is, thank you. Andy, I had the same questions, and thank you very much for asking those. The only other question I have is how many staffing members would it take to continue doing the food service?
I'm going to ask Amber I think I know, but I'll ask Amber.
I believe I have 3 members of the staff working at this point in time.
I missed like the first syllable of what you said there. You said there's 3 people right now?
Yes, there are 3 staff members currently serving lunch.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So there's not any particular ask for action on this right now. So if somebody does want to do something, I will need a motion before we move on. Is there any other discussion currently?
Andy, this is Amy. I'm happy to make that a motion that the school board vote to have the district provide lunch through June 17th.
This is April. I second that motion.
Okay, so motion on the floor to extend the lunch service as it currently exists to June 17th. And seconded, is there discussion? Okay, hearing none, on a roll call vote, I'll start with Gene this time.
Yes. Yes.
Thank Thank you. Anne?
Yes.
Thank you. April?
Yes.
Thank you. Amy?
Yes.
Thank you. And I'm a yes. Before we move on to the next agenda item, is there any last discussion that anybody wants? Any questions for Patty or Amber specifically regarding food service?
This
Going
is
once?
April, and I would like to just publicly thank our staff who has made these food services and food available to our students. Just a heartfelt thank you more than really what words can express.
Thanks. Alrighty then, moving on to agenda item 3D, a budget update. I think David is on the line, I believe, if we have any questions from the town, or for the town rather. But I think I will let Amber and Patty take it away and tell us kind of where we're at, and then we can have a discussion.
So I think I'll start with the email, since that's where we ended at the last meeting, that the select board was going to send their questions to me, and what we had decided was if they were really straightforward answers, I would just provide an answer, and then perhaps they could come to the meeting this evening. When I read the questions, I felt like they were questions that needed to be discussed with the board. I didn't feel like I could make some of the decisions that were asked. So if it's okay, Andy, I want to kind of read the questions just for the public. I did put the email in the drive, but I wanted to kind of review what was asked and answered.
Sure.
So the first question was regarding the impacts of the 1920 budget on the shutdown, the increases and decreases and reduction in spending. So what I had said was that we would review the updated projection reports and try to summarize the areas where we know there will be increases and decreases, and that I had planned to have it ready for you tonight, which Amber does. And we were also working on anticipating further spending that would need to occur. Of course, this is unprecedented and we're not really sure what we may need to purchase at the end of the year, but Amber does have those projections ready after I finish going through these questions. There was a question, would like to see plans for additional resource hires, not replacement hires, frozen until we have a better idea on the state of the economy. And I indicated that that was something the board would need to decide. There was a question about the actual enrollment for kindergarten. And my response was that the registration for kindergarten is going to be done online, all online this year, and that the forms were just finished and would be available. We don't know what the kindergarten numbers are until the parents register their students. There's no legal requirement to send your child to kindergarten. So sometimes we have parents register students right up until the first day of school. So we do not have those numbers, and we won't have those numbers until we're almost ready to start. Then an update, someone asked for an update regarding the 1920 revenues from tuition to Pembroke Academy from the AREA towns. And Amber did update that sheet and attached that to the drive as well. If you have specific questions about that, she can go over that form for you. And then a question came in later regarding the Epsom school board minutes that discussed a surplus that they had from high school tuition and a detail on why they expected that surplus. So I spoke to Amber about that, and she shared with me that Epsom typically budgets 5 extra students every year because they have to make sure they have enough money to cover the tuition. So they over budget 5 students from what they anticipate. They budgeted for 191 students. They currently have 161 students. So that's a 30 student difference, which is why they have a significant surplus. Ironically enough, in December of 2018, Amber estimated that they would have 161 students, which is exactly the number that they have today. So we are right on target, but Epsom did budget extra students to make sure they had enough money in their budget. And that was it from the email for questions.
So I guess maybe I jotted those down as quickly as I could. If it's okay with everybody, I think we can just step through those one at a time, have a little discussion about each of those. If anybody needs some clarification or something more in depth, or if we need to bring Amber in on something, we can do that. So the first question that was mentioned was the impact of the 1920 budget on the surplus, right? And you said Amber had some stuff for us on that.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so at this time, we are currently have for budget appropriations. So as some of you know, and those that don't, there are two different types of appropriation. There's budget appropriation and revenue appropriation. So for budget appropriation, as of today, or yesterday actually, we have about 376,000 in budget appropriation that has not been spent. Now that could change because we still are waiting for invoices to come in. And if we need to purchase something until the end of the year, that would obviously reduce that amount. That amount could also increase because if any POs that are currently encumbered and something comes in less than anticipated, then we would unencumber those funds and it would release them. So that number actually could get bigger. So it could go up, it could go down, but I am monitoring this on a weekly basis. There are not a lot of expenses coming through at this point, but we are waiting to finalize the final bills for the end of the year. With that said, the other portion is the revenue appropriation. Right now, I'm anticipating approximately 133, almost 134,000 in additional revenue. That is unanticipated. So if you add those two together, it comes to approximately $509,000. So about $500,000 right now we are running as a surplus.
Thank you. One question I have when we talk about the 133 extra from revenue, is that already figuring in the funds that we mentioned in the fifth question that will go back to Epsom for their kind of over budgeting?
Yes, it is taking that into consideration. What I've the enrollment tracking sheet that we put in the drive for you every month, I utilize that and then I go back and I look and see at what the average daily attendance has been, because that's what they're actually billed on, is the average daily attendance. So if they've only attended for 30 days, they're only charged for 30 days. If they attend the whole year, they're charged for the whole year. So with that said, we go back and we take a look and say, okay, how many students do we have? What's the tuition rate and what do we anticipate we're going to receive for revenue? So yes, that is already taken into consideration. We are right now we are running about 135,000 in surplus in that particular line.
Okay.
I had a
Anybody else on the board? Yep. Who is that? Amy?
Yeah, thank you.
Go ahead.
Amber, thanks for these numbers. This is really helpful. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I am putting you on the spot, but only just help me out for being a newbie. I understand conceptually you're saying these numbers could change because the books are not closed for the fiscal year, but can you give us some sense of how much they might change? Like, could they change, 5%, 50%? Like, what's the range there?
I mean, we're now in May. It should not be drastic at this point. I looked at to see what areas potentially for the revenue piece that we would not receive in, because I have to take that into consideration as well. And the majority of the pieces I do anticipate getting in, other than a couple small pieces, like for instance, rental revenue. We had anticipated a certain amount for that. We're not going to get all that in because our buildings aren't open. So there are things like that I had to take into consideration. But the revenue piece should be pretty much what I stated. It could fluctuate a little bit, but I cannot see it being drastic at this point. And for the budget summary, for the budget appropriation, the only lines that should be a drastic change, or if there was a drastic change, I should say, would be special ed. And I can't even imagine those would be at this point. We do update our POs continuously. So there shouldn't be any big drops or drastic drops up and down. And if there is, obviously we take a look to see why that would be. But we are monitoring things really on a daily basis at this point, like we do every year. So that's no different. So there may be some changes, but I can't imagine the fluctuations are going to be major.
Andy, this is Ann.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Go ahead, Ann.
I have a question for Amber. 134,000 in unanticipated revenue. Where did that come from?
I'm sorry, what was that?
The 134,000 in unanticipated revenue, where did that come from?
So it's a mix of, one is area tuition that I just spoke about. There's 135,000 there. We also had that, let's see. We're anticipating some extra dollars in the alt skills program, some extra in sped tuition. We now have student fees. The student fees have been brought into the operating budget. And so any fee that we charge for a course, a class, or so forth, has become part of the operating budget. So that's a new revenue source for us this year. So that's been added in. And then we received additional catastrophic aid than we had anticipated. And that's due to, depending on what services particular students needed for this year. Though if those change, then we potentially receive more or less funds. In this case, we received additional funding. And we also received some money for vocational school transportation.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Anybody else?
Andy, it's Gene.
Yep.
Amber, on the Medicaid revenue, I know that's been an issue all year.
Mm-hmm.
Is there any anticipation that we'll get back to where you were estimating?
Honestly, at this point, I'm not sure. At this point, we've only received a little over 4,000 and we were anticipating 33,000. So at this point, I'm unsure whether we will or not. And if they do, my concern would be, would we even receive that in this fiscal year?
If I can pause there for a second, Gene, that was a really good question. I just want to make sure that the new board members are aware of what you're talking about. This was a hot issue around budget time in the spring. There was a change to, and Amber, if I get any of this wrong, let me know. But there was a change to how we get reimbursed for Medicaid stuff. And basically it became more stringent in that if the service was not actually prescribed by a medical doctor, then we weren't going to get reimbursed for it. Now, so historically, school counselor says child needs this service. They get that service. We bill Medicaid. Medicaid pays us back for that. Schools don't have medical doctors on staff. So this change coming kind of suddenly meant basically that there was going to be a lot of services provided that we were not going to be able to get reimbursed for. So it sounds like that's still the situation to the tune of roughly $30,000.
That's correct.
Any other discussion on this year's budget surplus numbers before we move on to question number 2?
Andy, this is Ann. I do have one more question.
Sure.
On the April 15th, the Pembroke School, the voucher details, it shows that the Allenstown reconciliation for the year 1819 was 43,000. And Chichester 1819 year was 31,000. And Epsom was 52,000. And I just wanted to have a question for Amber. If these are reconciliation for those years, I'm not sure why they were paid out were they paid out of the 1819 budget and we just haven't closed it yet, or did they come out of the 2021 budget? I mean,
According to the area agreement, the payment is not made until the following year, and it would be paid out of this fiscal year for last year's reconciliation.
okay, so we have in our budget now what we would have to pay out for this year, we have in the 2021.
Yes, and I take that into consideration when I'm budgeting. And when I look at what I actually budgeted for us for that, I budgeted 124,844, and we actually spent 127,753. So I was about $2,900 difference off. So I came pretty close.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Andy, this is Amy. I guess I had a comment and a question, if that's all right.
Yep.
Okay. So I want to be clear with what we're saying about these documents and the figures in them that we're talking about, the revenue summary, the budget summary, which I found super helpful, but are we now sort of saying like, okay, the numbers are what the numbers are and we should ship these off to the select board for their information because they asked us for this information? Or are we saying that, we need some changes, or, I just want to be clear with what we're doing here. And then my question is, just for my edification, so let's say that $500,000 is the number, it turns out to be like 270 and 130. What does that mean for the town's budget? Does that mean that we, ultimately when we ask them to disperse funds, that the sum total of those disbursement requests is $500,000 less? In other words, the school district's not going to cut a $500,000 check and pay the town back some money. Just the meaning of the numbers for me.
Sure.
So when I say that, oh, sorry, Andy, go ahead.
Go ahead, Amber. I was going to ask you to anyway.
So when I say there's a surplus, when there is a surplus for a school district, it goes back to defray taxes directly. So it doesn't go to offset the town's budget, it goes back to offset taxes. So the appropriation is redistributed through the Department of Revenue. And then they take the revenue between the revenue from us and the revenue from the town, and then they come up with the tax rate. So it doesn't go directly to the town's budget, it goes to the Department of Revenue, they recalculate what the tax rate is, and then submit it.
So is it fair to say, Amber, in a way, that is basically, if our total budgeted number for 2020, 2021 were say $27 million even, and we had a $500,000 surplus at the end of this year, effectively, is that making next year's, it's not actually lowering the budget number, but it's kind of making next year's budget 26.5 rather than 27 million?
So what it's basically doing, it potentially is reducing the tax rate. But you have to also take into consideration the assessments. So it's not just, oh, you're going to look at it as a $500,000 reduction. There are other measures that come into play when calculating a tax rate. But it does absolutely help to the school portion of the tax rate. It should help to decrease it. It all depends on the valuation. So if the valuation skyrocket, even though we give it money back, the tax rate might not go down. But if the valuations stay pretty stagnant and we give back $500,000, then the school portion should decrease. Does that make sense?
Yep, and I think, and Amy, I don't know if this helps answer your question or not, but from my point of view, and if we talk to David in a little bit, I guess he can confirm or deny from the town's point of view, but I think the most immediate, the most time sensitive thing that we have under our control to do to help the current situation and the taxpayers is to return as much as possible in the surplus at the end of June. There are things that we can do regarding next year's budget to help decrease the size of the monthly payment that David needs to make, that the town needs to make to the school. But for lowering the tax rate, and I think the most immediate help that we can give is to have the surplus be as large as it possibly can at the end of June. Amber, is that a fair statement? I didn't hear. Did anybody hear Amber? I didn't hear her say it.
I'm sorry, maybe I pushed it on and off too quickly. I said yes.
Okay, thanks. Amy, did that answer your question? We kind of got to it from outside.
Yes, this is Amy. That answered the second part of my question. I'm still unclear with you know, what our move is for conveying this information to the select board. It's all well and good that we're considering it, but, you know, they've asked us for input. So I'd like to be clear with what we're going to provide them for input.
Yep. And what I'm thinking, and if anybody has a different idea, feel free to jump in. What I'm thinking is if we can kind of plod through these 5 questions that Patty asked us about and have a discussion on each one, then after we've talked about all of those, we can have a discussion about how we want to respond. If you want me to draft a letter and then send it out to all of you for review, or if we want to set up a special meeting with the select board, or I think after we've discussed all these points, then we can circle back to what's the best way to communicate with the town. Is that fair?
Andy, this is Ian. I have a question. David's on the line. Can he just weigh in on the information that Amy asked?
Sure, I'm okay with that. David, are you there? Do you have the ability to unmute yourself?
I'm on the phone.
Oh, you did it. I can hear you.
I didn't do nothing.
Maybe Patty did it then.
I did.
Pat must have unmuted me. It wasn't me.
Okay. So so the first question that Patty kind of brought up that we've been talking, I'm sure you heard it all, about the impact of the surplus that we have at this point. Is there anything that you want to weigh in on before we move to the next kind of bullet point?
No, I just want to make sure that everybody that's listening is clear and concise, and I think Amber hit it. These numbers are fluid right now. There's still things that could happen, whether it's on the town side or the school side. So if you can give back $509,000, that would impact roughly the tax rate this year, would reduce the tax impact by 67 cents on the school side. All right. I would like to see, for my personal benefit, I'm more concerned about the monthly allotments right now. We've got some large ones that are coming up here at the end of June, so I know that they were working on it, but I don't know if they have an actual number on that yet. I think, to Amy's question, I think, just speaking out of my side, is I think if you can put something in writing to clarify the decisions that you make to get to the board, it helps them to move forward, because I know that they're sitting on some critical items also and not sure what they're going to do with road paving and other things. So I think the more information you can get back to them, the better.
Thanks. David, can I ask you a question quick before we move on?
Yep.
Something I'm curious about. I saw, and I don't know how official this is, I saw it in the newspaper, I think. But I thought I had seen something where the governor or the legislature or somebody had earmarked like $40 million for municipalities, and it wasn't very clear what that was for. It gave it gave the number of what Berlin would receive and what Claremont would receive, but it didn't talk about any formula about how much each town would receive. Do you have any idea what I'm talking about? Is that something where we might get some unanticipated revenue into the town from some sort of emergency order?
I do. Information, I'm sure Patty and Amber and everybody else that's been involved with the teleconference calls are pretty much your head spinning right about now. There's more information that's coming out, and a lot of it's not real clear. Yesterday, the governor dropped a bomb on us about stipends for emergency personnel, but he didn't explain how that was going to be transferred over to the communities and whether or not it impacted New Hampshire retirement or not. So they're doing the best that they can. Now, based on the information that they sent out about what we might receive in the town of Pembroke, yeah, you have the federal government right now saying apply for this, this, and this. Then you've got the state saying, well, we can reimburse you for this, this, and this. And there's a lot of duplication of what they're both telling you to request reimbursement through the grants for. And there's a lot of unknown variables. So I'm working with the New Hampshire Municipal Association right now trying to get some clarification on all this stuff, because literally my head's been spinning the last couple of days here trying to figure this out. So, okay, but we are earmarked for some certain funds just like everybody else. That's the maximum amount of money that we could receive in town, but you have to have qualifying expenditures to equate to that number, and you cannot use that money to offset revenue shortfalls or anything like that. It has to be strictly related to COVID-19 related expenses. So just because
that's not going to make up for our lost car registrations and things like that.
if we lose money from rooms and meals, unless they come down with another stimulus plan, I can't use money. I can't say, hey, we lost $150,000. Let me take it out of this money. That's a no-go. We received money from Medicare that came in for the ambulance calls. There's a huge discussion on that right now as to what that money can and can't be used from. So we're getting a lot of notifications and limited guidance, if you will, at this point in time. So that's all I can tell you. But we are on that list just like everybody else. We're not getting $200,000.
Okay. All right. I think if everybody's okay, we'll move on to question number 2, which Patty, I think was plans regarding any sort of hiring freeze for the new positions that we budgeted for next year. I guess, Patty, if you want to just clarify the question, I think this is really more of a board discussion.
Sure, it says, would like to see all plans for new additional resource hires, not replacement hires, frozen until we have a better idea on the state of the economy. And for anyone who's listening, just to let you know, the only additional resources we have was to restore some prior cuts that included 4 aides for kindergarten, and then we had to restore a special ed case manager position, which we really didn't have a choice but to do that. So unless the principals are thinking of something I'm not, I believe it was just the 4 paraprofessionals for the kindergarten classrooms.
Thank you. Before I open it up for discussion, I was wondering if maybe our principals wouldn't mind, since I think I agree with Patty. I think most of this conversation is going to circle around those 4 aides. Could our principals give us the short version of what the aides are doing right now with the current situation and how they're helping the teachers, or how their workload may have changed in kind of remote learning setting?
So currently, just to clarify, Andy, those were cut out of the budget. So we're talking about restoring those positions next year.
Right. So I'm just wondering what the current people that are staffed in similar positions, how those, what those positions are doing with remote. I think I understand from having kids in the school that it seems like those aides are still being very useful and are helping certain students and everything like that. I was just wondering if the principals could kind of speak to that so that everybody can hopefully what I think is understand that those positions are not, somehow now, and this is kind of thinking down the road in case remote learning has to continue in September, which I hope it doesn't, but planning for the future. I don't want people to get the idea that those aides are not necessary, or that somehow because we're in remote learning, those aides are not being utilized. Does that make sense?
So sure, but I think I just want to make sure we understand that it's 2 different things. So the paraprofessionals that are servicing students now are assigned to students with special education services. The 4 new hires were not assigned to special ed students. They were to support all the students in the kindergarten classrooms. So if you want, do you want Susie to talk about what those 4 paras are needed for, and then maybe discuss what the special ed paras are doing?
Yeah, that would be good.
Okay.
Hi, Andy. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Right. So the 4 paras for the kindergarten, we've had those in the past. Unfortunately, they were cut out at one point. If anybody has been in a kindergarten classroom, to have one person in that classroom is, in my professional opinion, unsafe. When a student needs it at the beginning of the year, even throughout the year, there are students literally who do not know their name. They don't respond to their name. They might, they're not used to the structure of school. That's a lot of what kindergarten is. And so having only one adult in that room, in my professional judgment, is a safety concern. We also, at the kindergarten level, a lot of times do not have our, we don't have students identified that have needs. And so they come into kindergarten potentially with some needs that haven't been identified, and that's another area in which we need some extra support in that classroom. We're talking about students, 5-year-olds going to the bathroom by themselves, coming back into the classroom. There are times that they'll leave the classroom, and if when we're not on top of it, they might not know back where their classroom is, right? There's a lot of just teaching them how to be in school, and that's age appropriate. That's exactly how it should be. But for safety issues, we're really obviously wanting those 4 back reinstated into our kindergarten classes. Does that help, Andy?
Yep, it does. I think I'll open it up to the board for discussion.
Andy, this is Amy. Susie, can you please elaborate? I don't even want to say this out loud because it hurts, but let's imagine that the beginning of next year or half of next year or all of next year is remote. What would those 4 folks, what would it look like? I mean, I can imagine the answer is that they're going to be helping facilitate these little new students on Zoom, which is even more challenging than walking down a hallway. But can you just share about what that would look like from your perspective?
Amy, I would like an opportunity. I think that's, I would like an opportunity to have one of our SAU leadership meetings on that very topic, because kindergarten schools that have kindergarten classrooms are figuring that out across the board with remote learning and what that will look like, because kindergarten is not, you don't have to go to kindergarten. And so what would remote learning look like? I have to say that our kindergarten teachers, I was on a call with them today. They are already in the mindset of what would happen next year and how we would set that up to be successful. But we have so much to do because we are now so far behind. Our students are, everybody's students through the state and through the nation are behind because they haven't been in school like we are used to. Anyone would tell you that remote learning, though it is serving its purpose right now, is nothing close to what it's like, especially for our youngest students, to be right in front of the teacher. So for those paras next year to be able to help do small groups, to be on Zoom doing small groups, that would be a lot of what they would be doing during the remote learning time.
Andy, I have a question. This is
Go ahead.
so the 4 parents we're putting back in, how long ago were they cut?
I think 2 years, Anne, if not 2 years, 3. And the only reason I don't know that for certain is because I wasn't the principal. Mona Sandberg was the principal at that time. And so again, it's probably 3 years.
So you've had to, so kindergarten hasn't had a single aide in 3 years?
No. So if there is an IEP that a student has a para attached to them, then yes, that classroom may have an extra adult. But there are classrooms this year that did not, kindergarten classrooms that did not have adults. And we don't know always how that's going to fall. And so, and really that para is, if a child has been assigned a para, there's specific reasons why that adult is attached to that child. So there's still other students in the classroom that need that support.
Right. Thank you. But so we have 20 in the budget currently, we have 20 paraprofessionals at the Hills School.
Yep.
So right now you haven't been able to utilize them for kindergarten. Is that correct?
No, yes, and that's correct, because all of those it's what Patty said earlier. All of those are attached to an IEP, and these would be general ed paraprofessionals that are not attached to either as a shared para or as a one-to-one. That's the difference.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, of course.
Andy, this is April. I have a question. I'm not sure if this is best geared to our superintendent, but I heard a mention of maybe paras, if I understand correctly, leading small groups. I'd like to know more about, I see Susie shaking her head. I just would like to know more information about how they would interact. Would they accompany a teacher then, Susie, or whoever? I just want to kind of clarification on paras are not certified teachers and kind of an understanding of what their role really is. I think that would be really helpful.
Andy, do you want me to answer that?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. So I'm assuming, April, that you're talking about in our current situation with remote learning, yes?
April, no, it's just, I was just, what I had written down a note that paras could do small groups, like talking about if remote learning was extended into next year. And we
Yep.
did hire those 4 kindergarten paras for the
Yep.
classrooms.
Yep.
What those
So-
paras would be doing in remote learning. So that's what
Yep.
I'm asking about.
So when we have our instruction, our Zoom conferences, or on our Seesaw or Google Classrooms at the elementary level, we have chosen, because of the age appropriateness and the vulnerability of our youngest clientele, to always have 2 adults on the call. We feel like that's safe not only for the student, but that's safe for our own personnel. And so in doing that, a lot of times that is the paraprofessional. You can imagine a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, a 7-year-old in front of their computer in remote learning. If there's a one-on-one, and if there's any dispute on what happened on that call, we want to make sure that we've protected the child, the family. There are times that, we're trying to set the situation up for everyone to be successful and safe. And so they play a really important role. On top of that, with our social emotional, these students are so desperate to see the faces that they see every day at school, that they actually love seeing their paraprofessionals, because their relationships attached, that they, they play a really important role of helping the routines of the day. And so teachers have responded back telling me how important it is that they've been on calls, and how that settles the student, excites them, gets them motivated to come on and learn. So social emotionally, that really it helps as well. Did I answer your question, April?
Did, but I have another question, but I'll just hold my question. Thank you.
Okay, is there more discussion around any sort of hiring freeze? And I'll just remind everybody that there's not any particular action associated with this question currently.
Andy, this is Ann. The question I have is, the school board hasn't even started discussing class sizes. Is that correct?
I'm not sure what you mean, Ann.
As in currently having the staff that we currently have, is that's needed going on for a reduction in tuition, no, excuse me, a reduction in students coming in? Have we even discussed the teacher ratios for these classes yet?
I'm not sure, Patty, I'm not sure if I understand the question correctly. So I know, we voted our very first meeting together, March 17th, right, on extending contracts to our staff members, so we have an idea of what, the number of staff that we're planning to have next year. I believe most of those positions are already posted. Patty can correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm not sure where, I believe the principal and the superintendent have some discretion to move staff between grade levels and things like that based on what the class sizes end up being. I'm not sure if you're talking specifically about kindergarten or across the schools in general, or
Across the schools in general, say all of a sudden we have a drop of 20 students in one particular grade. We haven't even discussed about the class sizes that we currently have going forward. So I know we have sent out the contracts. I was under the understanding, misunderstanding, was brand new, my first meeting, is that that meeting there was an intention to hire every single teacher back. But I didn't know if we looked at the numbers to see if the amount of teachers were needed, concerning the drop in the amount of students coming in every year.
I guess maybe Patty or Amber, do you guys have enrollment projections? I don't know what time of year, we get numbers from the sending towns for PA. Do we have an idea of what enrollment numbers are looking like for next year compared to this year? I know we don't know really anything about kindergarten until the last minute. I was guilty of that myself. When we moved here, we didn't get to New Hampshire until 2 days before.
The only thing I have anyway at this point to go from is just the figures that we received during budgeting. So really, typically, we don't have head counts until October. That's when we get our beginning of year head counts. Other than kindergarten, we won't really know what the head count's going to be until school starts. Other than what we've anticipated by counting how many students we currently have, how many are leaving, and so forth.
So one thing, there's some kind of complexity, I don't want to say complexity, but some challenge with this too. And I think that with the union involved and things like that, we do have an obligation to extend contracts very early on in the year, and they have to be returned fairly early on if they don't want to incur a penalty. But if I see where you're going with this, maybe, Patty, can you tell us what would happen if there was a year where we had October, like Amber said, and all of a sudden, whatever, we had 15% less students than we had planned on. I'm sure on one hand, it's too late to cancel contracts or anything like that, but how would we handle something like that if there were a significant decrease in students from one year to the next that we did not anticipate?
So there's really nothing we can do to adjust staffing when we're in the middle of a school year. So, I don't have the data with me, but just in talking to principals in general during our leadership team meetings, kids come and go all the time. There was a time this year with Susie when we kept having kids move in and they were moving in the same grade. And it's this, a phenomenon that you can't imagine. And I don't remember what grade it was, but we would meet and she would say, 2 more kids moved into 3rd grade. Next week, 1 more kid moved into 3rd grade, and you might have had 5 leave 2nd grade. It's just a constant, I think it's probably surprising to the general public how many students are consistently moving in and out of the district.
And I think it's important to note that while we may get a drop in students or an increase in students, they're usually dispersed. I mean, rarely is it all in one grade. So it makes it difficult to reduce staff when you have the students dispersed throughout the grade levels.
Right, and I think even dispersed throughout classes too, not just grade levels, but if you lose 30 kids in the high school, that the effect that's going to have on a class where a teacher is teaching a class that has 18, 19 students in it, if 30 kids leave, that's probably only 1, maybe 2 kids out of each class. So that's not necessarily going to facilitate a reduction in staff. So yeah, sorry, Ann, I might have gotten a little off track there. I don't know if that answered your question or if you want to restate or.
Yeah, that was just my question. If all of a sudden we realize next year coming in, we're not going to need 4 teachers in 3rd grade, then I did see in the clause in the CBA that says there is a reduction in force.
Yeah, so there's a reduction in force, but that needs to be done before the contracts are issued on April 15th. And I think there's a March notification on that.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Andy?
Yes, Gene, go ahead.
Hey, just, with what's going on right now, and trying to picture what the fall might look like. Excuse me. I think there could be a real possibility that there's a large decrease in the student population. People losing their jobs, moving elsewhere, moving in, with other family members in other towns. So I think that's something we have to take into consideration moving forward. At this point, it may not pan out, but there's a lot of people that are going to be hurting. And then, there's a transient population in Pembroke. There's also, a large transient population in Allenstown. And this could really affect them, and in turn affecting the school district.
Thanks. Anybody else? All right. We will move then to the next question, which, well, I guess the next question was kindergarten enrollment, and it's already kind of been stated that we won't have those numbers until the last minute, or possibly right up to October. Is there any discussion that anybody wants to throw in on that before we move to the 4th question?
Andy, this is Amy. Can I just make a quick comment?
Sure.
I don't know if there are any similarly green members of the Board of Selectmen, as green as I am, or just as a customer service level, it might be helpful to write out a couple sentences like, well, we don't know why and here's why. However, this year we had this many people. Over the past 5 years, the average has been this many students, just to give some sort of ballpark information.
Sure. Yep, and we have all that historical data, so that would be pretty easy to do.
This is April. I would also support sharing the historical data that we have, although we do not have actual numbers at this time.
Thank you. Okay, so the 4th question, Patty, I might need your help on this one. All my note says is 1920 tuition revenue.
Sure. I think that was just about updating the AREA towns and their enrollment, which Amber did on that sheet. And I attached it to the email to the select board so that they would see the document. And I put it in your drive as well so that everyone had it.
Andy, this is Ann. The selectmen, we did receive that spreadsheet, and thank you very much for sending that, Patty, right up to date until right up till March. But the question that the selectmen had, and maybe it just didn't come across clear, we're looking for the amount for the revenue that's attached to that sheet. Was it on there and they just missed it?
Oh, okay. I misunderstood. I just thought you wanted the number of students updated. Amber, is that where the $134,000 came from in the revenue sheet?
So right now we're estimating approximately 135,000 surplus in that line. Now, obviously that could change slightly if any students were to leave between now and the end of the year, because it's based on daily, average daily attendance. But it would not change drastically by any means.
Thank you, Amber. So right now, currently, even though we're doing remote learning, they're technically still attending Pembroke Academy.
Absolutely. Yes.
So I play back to the selectmen, the 130,000, 135,000 is the total attached to that spreadsheet.
Approximately, that's where, yep, That's where it is. According to the spreadsheet that was sent out, that is the amount of anticipated surplus.
Thank you.
Well, that actually goes to the end of April. April 27th is the most recent data we have.
Yeah, I saw it was quite current.
Andy, I have a quick question.
Sure, Gene.
Concerning your average daily attendance, to have a student leave the school district, do they have to formally leave the school district? Or is it while we're remote learning non-participation? How are we figuring this?
Do you want me to answer that?
Please.
Yes, so during remote learning, the same rules apply, that if someone left the district and moved to another district, they would need to re-enroll in the new district. If they are just not participating because of whatever family circumstance, they're still counted in our average daily membership.
Thank you.
Any other questions or clarifications on the tuition revenue question? Right, I think the last question that we had from the select board, and maybe this was already clarified, but I'll ask for repeat just since we're going down the list here, was the surplus that Epsom was expecting, and that had to do, I guess, with that they budget a little bit extra so they're sure that they have the money. Amber or Patty, do you want to explain that one a little more in depth?
Each of the area districts are slightly different because Pembroke, we're estimating revenue. Then what they do is they take pretty much exactly what I have here on that enrollment sheet that I sent out to you all. In the very beginning of it, over to the left, I have what the districts budgeted in a gray column. And then I have a second column where it says PA budgeted. And what the PA budget is what I've estimated using those numbers for revenue. But the district's budgeted, that's how many students that they budgeted that they're going to have to pay for students that they send to Pembroke Academy. Okay. Epsom in particular, they, since I have been here anyway. Students. Oh, did I cut out?
Yeah, but I can hear you right now.
Am I here? Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, did I cut out a second?
You did.
Okay, well, I'm just going to start over, so I don't know what you heard and what you didn't hear. Is that okay?
Sure.
Okay, so on that enrollment sheet that I sent out that has all of the data of how many students, there are two gray columns over to the left. One column is district budgeted. That column represents the amount of students that each of the area schools have stated are going to attend Pembroke Academy, and that's how much they've budgeted for. Excuse me, other than Epsom. Epsom always adds in additional students. They typically, in the last 5 years, and I'm not sure how much longer this has been going on, but at least the last 5 years, they have budgeted at least 5 additional students each year. They do that to be sure that they have enough money in their budget should the tuition change or they end up having more students than they anticipate to cover their bottom line. In the second column is the PA budgeted. So the PA budgeted on that sheet represents what I estimated for how many students we're going to budget for our revenue purposes. So those two columns are very different. One is what how much each district is budgeting for so that they have enough money in their budget, and then what we need to budget for a revenue source. And Epsom in particular, they had a large body of students that they had anticipated coming in. Now we have to remember there's like a 14, 15 month time period when these numbers are given because we're budgeting that much early or that early. So at that time when we were at that budget session, they had anticipated 191 students. Okay, that includes the 5 additional students. We budgeted for PA 161 students. Where they are right now is exactly 161 students. So it looks like they have a large amount of money of surplus in that line because they've had students leave, whether it been through some students may have left during that same budget year that we were budgeting, because we're budgeting, October through March. We could have had students leave after March. Any students that may have left over the summer, and then any students that could leave over this current fiscal year. So that's a large gap in time where students might come and go. So that's really that transition period. And for that particular district, really actually all the districts, area districts, do have a surplus in that line.
Thank you. Does anybody have questions regarding that?
Andy, this is Ann. I just have one question. I just want to make sure I wrote this down correctly, Amber. So any amount that we would owe, say Epsom, because they didn't send the amount of students that they anticipated, that would come out of the 2021 budget, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And in the area agreement, I'm new to that committee this year. I was under the understanding it was a reduction in tuition and not an actual payment back to the town. Am I wrong?
No, we do a payment back to the town. Oh, do you mean a reduction for payment in that new current year?
Yes, that's how I read it. I just wanted to be sure.
No, we do. We do a reconciliation of what we had estimated that tuition rate was going to be for that year. And then when we reconcile the year and determine how many students were actually enrolled and what Pembroke Academy's actual budget ended at, we calculate the tuition rate based off that. So whatever it netted out is what the amount we calculate. So that's how we know how much we have to pay back the district. And sometimes the districts have to pay back Pembroke if the tuition rate wasn't high enough. So it can go both ways. This particular time, Pembroke had to pay back, but there have been times where it's gone the opposite direction as well.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure that it was my understanding. What you're saying is that we pay them back the actual cash. My understanding on the area agreement is that we give them a reduction in their cost of the tuition the following year. So I just misinterpreted the area agreement. So we do pay them back.
Yeah, we do not recalculate the tuition rate for the new year.
Thank you, Amber.
You're welcome.
Andy, this is April. I have a question kind of in the same line that Ann and Amber were just talking about. At the last AREA meeting that I attended, one of the districts asked, and I brought this back to the Pembroke board, they wanted to realize revenue from returned tuition from PA. And so I wish there could be more discussion about that, because my understanding is Pembroke would then need to add a line in our budget paying out instead of doing the reduction in tuition. So I feel like this is a little fuzzy, and I'm looking for some clarification on that, because it's not like we cut a refund check. Am I understanding that incorrectly?
Amber, do you mind?
Yes, that is correct. Because Pembroke does not have a budgetary line, we cannot physically cut them a check. So we have to realign the PO for the tuition. So what we do is we don't recalculate the tuition, but we will say, I'm just going to throw a number out there as an example. Let's say we owed Allenstown back $30,000. One time we would say, we're going to reduce that payment by $30,000 so that we can track what those changes are. We don't go back and calculate, from each additional month. We just take one payment and say, okay, when the reconciliation ends, we owe $30,000 to Allenstown. We reduce that PO in the new fiscal year by $30,000. So it becomes a revenue shortage reconciliation. So when I give out the budget, or excuse me, the estimated revenue sheet every year when we're doing budget, there is a line in there on that sheet that says tuition reconciliation, area tuition reconciliation. That line is where those figures are coming from. That's where we demonstrate what that change would be.
Thank you. So it
That's
sounds
been in there the last couple of years, I believe.
So it sounds like just there may be some confusion about the terminology, refund versus reconciliation versus credit. So we're clarifying that we're not offering refunds, but what we do is a revenue shortage reconciliation. That's a one-time, what would you call that, Amber? A one-time,
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would call it
Offset?
a credit. Yeah, an offset credit is probably the best way to state that.
thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, so I've got some notes here. I'm sure everybody else does too for those 5 questions. Can we have a quick discussion about how best to handle getting this information into the hands of the select board? I'm happy to draft something if people are comfortable with that, and I'll certainly be careful to send it out to all of you and ask for feedback before I send it off, if that's how we want to do it. If you guys think it's more appropriate to ask Patty or Amber to do that, we can ask them to do that. Any suggestions people have about how to convey this information?
Andy, this is Ann. Can I suggest outlining basically the information from the minutes this evening and send it over to the selectmen? Does that sound feasible?
Sure, just kind of summarize the minutes.
Right, truly as a draft, because we're not going to meet for 2 weeks. But the sooner we get the information over to the selectmen, I think would be the best.
Is everybody comfortable with that when Sandy has the draft minutes finished? Kind of highlighting the sections that reference the questions that they asked and sending those along to the select board as a matter of response?
Andy, this is Amy. I'm comfortable with that, but additionally, I'd like to see us send some of the supporting documents that we received in our board packet.
Okay, as far as historical information around enrollment trends and things like that.
Sorry, yes, yep.
This is Ann again. My suggestions was it just, so it doesn't more extra work to Patty and Amber, because we basically have all the information in a discussion. I just didn't want to make more work for them to go through and reiterate what was said in the minutes.
Sure. I guess, David, are you still on the call?
I am.
Does that sound like an acceptable way for you to receive the information if we take the draft minutes and kind of underline, highlight whatever the points that are directly towards the questions that were asked of the board and then forward you a copy of those?
Along with the backup, the documentation that you have, that's fine.
Yep. Okay. I don't think we need a motion or to vote on that process, but we'll make sure that happens. I guess Sandy, Patty, whoever, once those draft minutes are completed, let me know. I will gather the information out of the drive that I think is pertinent. I'll send a quick email out to all the board members to make sure that you're in agreement with what I'm sending before I go ahead and do that, and then we'll get that over to the town as soon as we can. Everybody okay with that?
That's fine.
This is Ann.
Andy, this is Amy.
Yep.
Sorry, I wasn't sure if someone else was going.
Go ahead, Amy.
My radar red flags are going off about, I certainly want to have the ability to review what you've prepared to send out, but I want to make sure that we're not inadvertently having a meeting by having an email communication about what you propose to send out. So can you just address that and make sure we handle that appropriately? Thanks.
Yep. So I will, thank you, Amy. I appreciate that. So I will send it out to all of you as a group. But as with whenever I do that, the best course of action so that it's a one-on-one discussion between you and me is to reply and do not reply all, or even better, create a new email back to me. And any edits that you might have, any concerns, any changes, let me know. I think that, as it's been stated a couple of times, town would like this information as soon as they can possibly get it. David's on the call, so I assume he can relay some of it, but I'd like to get the official stuff to him quickly. So I know it's a lot, and we've all had a lot going on, but when I send those, if we can take the time to review them quickly, especially if there's going to be changes that need to be made, what I'll do is wait until I've heard from each of you, try to incorporate all of the changes that you suggest, resend it out to all of you if necessary, and then I can get it over to the town. But that's an excellent point, Amy. We need to be very careful about how we do the communication. So like I said, best thing you can possibly do when you get an email from me like that goes out to everybody is just create a new email to respond back to me on.
Can I make a suggestion, Andy?
Absolutely.
I have a thought about avoiding any email correspondence whatsoever. And I think the simple solution would be to send the draft, like I'm happy to do it and copy the board, but to send the draft minutes that has all the information in it, to send with it the budget projections that Amber did, the AREA enrollment. So like Amy said, the backup documents that the board has. So it's just factual information. That way we don't have to write a letter and get input in it. And I'm happy to do that if that satisfies the board.
I think that's good. I think that keeps it cleaner. Board members, is that acceptable? Kind of keep the commentary out of it and just send along what we have for them to review.
Yes.
Yes.
Andy, this is Ian. Yes, I do think there's one thing missing though in the conversation is being read out loud, the questions from the selectmen, but David is looking for some assistance with working with the school with their monthly payments going from June forward.
So thank you for bringing that up. I meant to mention it earlier. And just today I was emailing with Christine and Amber, and Christine did rework that schedule with Amber's approval. And I believe it's probably almost ready to go if it's not done already. And she's done that for all of our districts. So we will be getting that to him soon.
Thank you.
All right. I think that concludes immediate business then. We will move to agenda item number 4, which is our second public comment section. I'm going to bring my chat up. Again, any members of the public that would like to say something, please type me a little note in the chat that you want to be recognized, and I'll do my best to do that. And I think we may have forgotten, like we did last week, to talk about people that might be on the phone. So once I'm done clearing up any questions that might be in the chat, I'll see how many people are on the phone and see if there's a way that we can recognize those folks as well. So I'll pause for a half a minute or so and see if anybody's got anything they want to drop in the chat from the public.
And I just wanted to thank David for being on the line in case we had any questions for him.
Agreed.
I unmuted all of the phone call people.
Okay, I'm not seeing anything in the chat. If you're still thinking about it, feel free to drop something in there. But if you are dialed in on your phone and you've got something that you want to ask or contribute, we'll just kind of try to get one at a time here if we can.
Hello?
Yes. Can we get your name?
Steve Speckhart.
Thank you.
I don't know if this is talked about or if it's talked about at this level or not, but you were talking earlier about levels of students in your classrooms and what you do if there's not a lot of people that are showing up in at the beginning of the years and stuff like that. I was concerned if the situation that we're in with COVID-19, if people hold their kids out because of, potentially bringing something home. They're worried about that happening, so they don't send their kids to school. if there's a contingency that the school board is going to have set up similar to remote learning for those families that want to go that route. And maybe if there's not enough students for teachers at actual school facilities, maybe divert those teachers into that facility type of realm, something like that.
I'll give a very brief response. I guess first thing to say is it's very early still. I have heard from different places that there are discussions in what the fall is going to look like. Obviously, that's going to evolve a lot over the next couple of months. I think that it's something the school board would have to discuss. I wouldn't be shocked if there is some sort of component of remote learning still around, but again, it's super early to start making those decisions. I do know that Patty meets with the other superintendents around the state and in the Lakes region and whatnot on a fairly constant basis, and they're all talking about those.
Okay, good. I know it's kind of early, but it's now that it needs to be talked about, obviously, versus later. So I appreciate it.
Thanks. Any other call-in users want to comment?
Andy, before we move on, when you're done with public comments, I wanted to add something to the budget conversation.
Okay. I think I don't hear any other call-in users. Patty, if you want to go ahead and mute everybody again.
Excuse me, Andy, this is Ann. I did have a public comment.
Yeah, that's fine. I just wanted her to mute the call-in users. If you've got something, go right ahead.
I have a question from the building department at Town Hall. There are windows being replaced at a building at PA, which was probably the old SAU building, the white building. Looks like windows being replaced there. There's no permit that's been pulled. The town doesn't charge the school for the permit, but they still need to make sure that they're following building codes.
Thanks, Ann. We'll take a look and see what's up. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat. I'll give it maybe another 15, 20 seconds, see if anybody pops anything in there. Okay. Patty, you had something you want to add to the budget conversation before we move on to number 5?
Thank you. So we didn't put the next fiscal year's budget on the agenda, but I did put something in your drive tonight that I would like you to take a look at. And Josh is here to answer questions. I apologize, you probably didn't get a chance to look at it yet. But this is the time of year that Josh would typically start arranging for his contractors to do the summer work. So I wanted to let you know, Josh did a great job outlining the projects that are to be done and how they're to be paid for. So some of them will come out of the trust funds and they've been budgeted for and it won't impact the budget. There are other projects that will come directly from the budget for next year. So I think at the next meeting, the board will need to have a conversation about their intention on moving forward and when they would like to move forward with these projects. I think, again, Josh is here and he can, if you want him to speak to any of these, he can. But I think the 2 asbestos projects those need to get done. So the top 2 for Hill and PA are asbestos abatements. The other items that say project next to them, those are items that are in the budget currently that need to get done and were in the approved budget. So I know you're going to be having conversations about the budget for next year, and I just wanted to put that on your radar so that you could consider it and ask Josh any questions you might have at this point.
Thanks for staying on this whole time, Josh. Does anybody have any questions from Josh? I know we haven't had really a chance to review that document yet.
Andy, what's the name of the document again? I didn't write that down quick enough.
I added it to your drive just right before the meeting, I think maybe at 5 o'clock, and it's called Facilities Projects for Summer 2020.
Thank you, Patty.
So Josh, I don't think we really need to have you go through the whole thing tonight before we even take a look at it. I would, if you can join us next time, that would be great. And I would say, think about, I'm sure it's already done on the sheet, but prioritization, things like that. I'm sure there will be some discussion about next year's budget and if any of those things can possibly be delayed and things like that. So I guess if you're thinking about it between now and then, that's the stuff I would kind of keep in mind to see if there's anywhere that we can save some money, which of those things are health and safety type of things and that sort of stuff. Absolutely. All right. So if
I think Amy has a question.
Oh, sorry, Amy. Go ahead.
We can't hear you, Amy. Oh, you know why? I muted all the phone people. Amy was in there. I think she's the 496 number. Try now, Amy.
Yes, yes.
Got
okay,
it.
Hi. Somehow I knew I'd have to do the wave. I just wanted to ask if, just to put it back on you a little bit, can you go through and make a recommendation for us? You're more boots on the ground. Obviously all of these projects need to be done or else they wouldn't be on this list. But we also all hear that we're in unprecedented circumstances here. And so if you had to take the axe to this list and lessen the extent of a project or defer a project entirely, it would be really helpful to have those recommendations in writing before the next meeting. Thanks.
We will have our leadership meeting, all the Pembroke administrators, and we will prioritize the list for you. Thank you.
Anybody else before we move on?
Andy, can I just say thank you to Amy, because that is the same situation that the selectmen are currently doing.
Great. All right, if there's nothing else, Patty, do we have need for non-public session?
We do. We have small letter B for, yeah. We have small letter B for hiring, and we may or may not need small letter C, but I won't know until we're in. So when we come out, we can let the public know if we needed to utilize C.
Andy, this is Amy. I apologize for interrupting and going off agenda here, but I didn't realize that we didn't have an agenda review at the beginning of the meeting, or maybe it was when I was having my communication problems. I wondered if we could make time now to just get a very brief update on the plan for graduation.
Sure, I think that's warranted. And I'll say that was an oversight on my part, Amy. I had actually meant after the last meeting to ask Kathy to include the agenda review, even on these emergency ones, in case we want to mess around with stuff. And I forgot to do that, so I'll take a note and get that on there. But yeah, Patty or Paul, do you want to talk a little bit about if there's been any progress on graduation plans?
I will let Paul take that over.
Thanks, Patty. Hi, everyone. I just want to let you know that I have had daily communication with Barbara Michaud, our Director of School Counseling, as well as our graduation coordinator, and we have sought out a few different venues that we are looking into for an alternative site for our graduation ceremony, one of which is Fisher Cat Stadium, otherwise known as Northeast Delta Dental Stadium, and as well as the Loudon Motor Speedway. And Barbara has been in contact with both of the facilities planners at those venues and is getting a gauge on pricing for utilization of those venues. We are also looking at a timeline on a graduation, most likely going to push that back from our June 6th pre-scheduled date for graduation to something in mid-July. Possibly even later July, early August at this point. And obviously we are looking for state and local guidance on how to proceed with those timelines and making sure that we are acting in a manner that's commensurate with those provisions. And at this point, I would say that nothing is set in stone, nothing is really definitive in nature, but we are certainly looking at those dates in mid to late July as the most realistic options for us. And certainly if we can afford to do it within our budgetary means, that we would utilize those alternative venues. The primary objective at this point is to make sure that we are, number one, celebrating our seniors in an appropriate and feasible manner that is also within the guidelines of safety and health precautions, but also making sure that we are being fiscally responsible in doing so. So it's kind of a precarious balancing act in making sure that we're meeting all of those needs. But Barbara is, she's been our graduation coordinator since I've been at PA and well before that, and she has a pretty good handle on things. And she actually has some contacts at least one of those venues that she is communicating with. So at this point, I would say, the early projections are a mid to late July graduation. Obviously, we would want the board's support and approval of that. And secondarily, with a change in venue from the grounds at PA, we would want the board's approval and support of moving our graduation to one of those venues.
Can I add to Andy? We have been waiting for guidance from the Department of Education, and it actually came very late this afternoon. So I need to digest the information and review it with Paul and his staff. But I think the concern from the commissioner and the governor at this point is ensuring that social distancing. So some folks are talking about having like a drive-in theater or the racetrack or this really big place where cars can park, 6 feet apart. But the concern that he expressed in his letter is how are we going to ensure that these kids that have not seen each other, that this is the biggest day of their life, how are we going to stop them from jumping out of cars and hugging each other and being excited, and cautioned us to work with our local law enforcement if we do think that we're going to attempt something like that. So it's a pretty difficult balance right now to keep the kids safe, but to also be able to celebrate them somehow.
And one other note, Andy, just one of the things that I have seen emerging among conversations with some of my contemporaries around the state is the debate around having a virtual graduation as opposed to an in-person and live graduation. And I would echo Patty's sentiments. We would much rather prefer to have something live and in person happen, but we want to make sure that it is with extreme caution and fidelity to safety and health guidelines in order to do so. But if something virtual were to be the prioritized manner in which we conduct graduation, then we would entertain that as an option as well. But our focus and our priority is to hopefully have something in person where students are on site and receiving their diploma from a live individual. Hopefully that's me. I don't know.
Thank you. Anybody have any questions regarding graduation?
Thanks, Andy. This is Amy. Paul, thank you so much for that update. It's so exciting to hear. I totally understand the concern of keeping these kids from hugging and high-fiving and all that, but an in-person thing would be so great. What I really wanted to say, though, is please don't foreclose options because they're too expensive. I'm not at all advocating that we find school money to pay for any unbudgeted expenses, but I do think that there might be some businesses or individuals in the community who would be willing to pony up quite a lot of money. And I'm not one of them, nor is my company, but to pony up a lot of money for a cause like this. Like, they wouldn't help with the tax situation or anything else, but like this has a special appeal. And I would be happy to do fundraising for that if it came to that. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. And just to piggyback on that, I want to give a shout out to our parents in the community, particularly those of the senior class who have taken on the efforts of coordinating an initiative to gather signs to be put in the front lawns of our senior class to be paid for predominantly by the parents of the senior class. And I think that was a great gesture and something that the parents have spearheaded. We've had a lot of community support, and this is not by any means a venture that we're going alone on this in celebrating our seniors. And I really want to commend the parents and the community members for getting behind our seniors and supporting them in a critical juncture in their high school career. So yeah, I appreciate your sentiments on that, Amy. Thank you.
Andy, can I ask a question? This is Anne.
Sure thing.
Paul, I don't know if this is something that the parents of the seniors would feel comfortable with, but if they put a sign in their front yard, is there something that the community could do, like a parade like the teachers did, but a parade for the parents and the families and just residents can just join in a parade to go throughout the town and congratulate the seniors?
Yeah, certainly, Ann. Thank you. I would not be opposed to entertaining any ideas from our community stakeholder group if they have suggestions for ways of celebrating students that are within the guidelines of safety and health precautions. I think that, you know, we've seen people come out of the woodwork and really supported our students and demonstrated ways that they can be creative and you know, given some ingenuity into this whole venture to make sure that seniors feel supported and celebrated in a way that you know, is unprecedented given the circumstances. So I would not be opposed to, you know, putting the school's efforts behind supporting such an effort. But if that was something the community wanted to do, I know that there is a class of 2020 parent Facebook group that's out there. I know that there are several Pembroke related Facebook organizations that, you know, could get the word out. I certainly would, you know, I know that there would be members of our school community that would get behind such a venture. So I would encourage folks, if they are creative and they want to get the message out there and start sharing these ideas, if it's within the reason of, you know, health precautions and things of that nature, then we could certainly entertain that.
Thank you, Paul. I just wanted to find out if there's something that does happen, that the information could get given to either the selectman or Dave Joden at Town Hall or the chief of police, just so residents who don't have children in the school district can still get behind the whole community. Thank you.
Absolutely. I'll do whatever I can to communicate to all stakeholders.
I just have a question regarding a potential or other ideas for the graduation planning. I think we've all seen those commercials for SNU where they actually go out and they deliver their degrees. Is that something that's been talked about, or maybe even somebody reach out to SNU to find out how they traditionally do that? I think it's normally 20 people, and I know right now we're under guidance for gathering no more than 10. But that might be, you know, kind of something that could also be incorporated in a parade, but just kind of a personalized delivery as well.
Paul?
Sure. That's a great suggestion, April. I think, you know, again, it's all about the balancing act of preserving folks' comfort level with having other community members make contact with them, but also properly celebrating and recognizing their seniors. So any efforts that we make to get out there into the community, whether it's school personnel or parents or community members, we want to make sure that everyone on board is comfortable with that level of contact that's being made. And so I will certainly present this to our graduation coordinator. I will tell you that the overwhelming preference right now is to have whatever conference of a degree be done in person so that students receive their diploma in hand by a person, whether that's individually or as a group with, you know, proper social distancing precautions in place. But certainly, you know, if we were to make any kind of, you know, on-site delivery or person-to-person contact, we would want to make sure that that was within folks' comfort levels.
April, again, I just have a question. We've talked a lot about graduation, but we also know that often senior traditions are important. So I'd like to hear a little bit about maybe how any senior traditions are being handled remotely.
Sure. Well, I will go on record as saying this is the most successful senior skip day that we have ever had in the history of high school. Um, but in general, I would say some of the things, seniors typically like to do a senior prank. I would say that, that is strongly discouraged at this point. We don't want students coming on campus or making any contact with one another or coming onto school grounds. But there are things associated with the week leading up to graduation, such as convocation, awards night, where students are given scholarships, things of that nature that we are efforting to roll into the actual graduation ceremony. So whereas you might have seen a graduation in years past that were 75 to 90 minutes long, you may see a 2-hour graduation this year because we're going to kind of blend those events into one ceremony. And other than that, I would say, unfortunately, we've had to cancel things like the senior class trip to Vermont, the senior cruise on the Mount Washington steamship. There are other things that traditionally we have done to celebrate the seniors that unfortunately have gone by the wayside. And a lot of those things have been determined for us by external forces, which is unfortunate. But in speaking with Barbara Michaud, our graduation coordinator, we are mindful that there has been a lot that has been stripped from our seniors, and quite capriciously, and we're efforting to make sure that we try and at least maintain some fidelity to the year-end celebrations that these students are so richly deserving of. I would tell you that, quite honestly, we don't have a lot of definitive answers right now, but those things are at the forefront of our minds, and we are planning in great effort to make sure that we try and provide as many of those traditions as possible. But some of the behind the scenes things that I think you're speaking about, I think unfortunately are going to be lost in the minutia of what this pandemic has become for all of us.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to agenda item number 5, we have need to go into non-public session in accordance with New Hampshire RSA 91-A:3, Roman numeral 2, small letter B, and possibly C. Before I take a roll call vote to go into non-public session, I'll just let the public know. Patty has a mechanism on her end for the meeting that will, if I say this wrong, Patty, jump in, but basically place all of you in a separate kind of waiting area where you won't be able to hear us during non-public. And when we finish, we can bring that group, whatever's left of it, back in. So once we take the roll call vote to go into non-public, you will be moved and you won't be able to hear us anymore until non-public is finished. So roll call vote to go into non-public session. Gene.
Yes. Yes.
April.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
And Ann.
Yes.
And I'm a yes. We'll give Patty a minute or two to make sure she can sequester people appropriately.
Okay, and I'm going to keep Principal Marston and Headmaster Famulari because of some hiring conversations that we need to have. Susie, I don't think you have anyone, correct? All right. So I am going to move people one at a time. Andy, can you check the list of participants and make sure I got the right people?
Yep, and did you see Sandy's note?
No.
In your text. Don't forget to turn off the video.
Thank you. Okay, I'm moving you now, Sandy.
All right, bye.
Bye.
Needed time?
You can go. I'll take care of the minutes.
Really?
Yep.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.
Bye.
All right, so we've got me, Patty, Amber, Amy, and April. Calling user, that's Amy. Oh, Amy's on twice because, okay, gotcha. Jean,
Amy, that's
John,
your phone, right?
Paul.
Yes, I am user number 7, the 496 number.
Okay. All right, now
I think we're all set then.
I've got to lock the meeting.
Who is
Stop the recording.
Okay.
Who is listed as Sandy Dion? Is she still showing up as a participant in my list?
Oh, I thought I moved her.
I don't,
And I also
she's
see
not in my
Amber.
list.
Not in your, okay, I'll try to refresh my list.
Yeah, if everybody wants to double check, that would be helpful.
Amber, I think you're good to go. Have a good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Amber.
All right, you're welcome. Have a good night.
Good night.
Thanks, bye.
All right, so I've got me, Amy, Andy, Ann, April, Amy, phone, Jean, John, Paul.
I still got one here.
I do?
Sandy Diane.
Yeah, I don't see her in my list.
She's not showing on my list either.
Yeah, she's
On my
definitely
screen.
in my list as well.
She's gone now.
Agreed, I don't see her in my list now.
That's so strange.
Patty, did you stop the recording?
I am doing it right now. All right, has been resumed. So I think we are good to be back in session.
Okay, can I get a motion regarding the resignations discussed in non-public session?
This is Amy. I will move to, wait, which motion do you need? It's late.
Resignations.
Yeah, accept the
Motion to
resignations.
accept the resignations as tendered.
April will second.
Thank you. On a roll call vote, the motion is to accept the resignations discussed in non-public session. Amy?
Yes.
April?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
And myself, a yes. Thank you. And can I have a motion to accept the 4 nominations as discussed in non-public session?
Motion to approve.
April will second.
Thank you, Jean and April. And of course, on a roll call vote, Jean?
Yes.
April?
Yes.
Ann?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
And I'm a yes.
Okay.
All right. All right, that is the end of our agenda. Our next scheduled meeting is for Tuesday, May 19th at 6:30. Unless something drastic changes between now and then, that will also be a remote meeting on WebEx. Details posted in the same location. And I will accept a motion to adjourn. Sorry, I missed it.
And I did have a question. Some residents have been sending me a text. They asked me about the savings that we may see because we're not having any spring sports. So the fees, HIAA, is that something I should ask them to direct to Amber?
Yeah, or we could ask Amber to join us next time around. But yeah, if they would like something sooner than that, I would say they can reach out to Kathy. Patty, is that the proper way to do that?
No, well, typically all questions and requests go to me, and then I put them out to the staff who would be appropriate to provide me the answers, and I'll get right back to you.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Patty. The second question, Andy, I didn't have a chance to ask Amber. When she listed the amount of money for the budget that hadn't been spent is the $376,000. And I wanted to find out, does that include after we put the money into the warrant articles that the voters voted in?
I will let her speak to that. I'm pretty sure it's a no. I think somebody asked that last time. So I think
Yeah.
I think that's a no.
Is there any way that the school board can get an idea of what that 376,000 is coming from that's not spent in the budget?
That was one of the sheets, and in the drive, there was one for revenue and one for budget appropriations. And it's broken down by account levels, like the 1100s, 1200s. I think it's in there, hopefully.
Yeah, it looks like it's called Pembroke Year-to-Date Report 05/05/20. That's the name of it. If that's the right one. Yep, yeah, that's got 376 as the total. So it's not super specific. It's 1100 lines, 1200 lines. But yeah, if you want to look over that, and then if there's still specific questions, we can. I'm sure that budget will be on the agenda next time around. We can get into the nitty-gritty if we need to.
All right, and one last question I have is that we were saying that there was 3 people on staff that are currently serving up the lunches. We're to see a savings in employee cost because we have 12 food staff. We have 4 managers and 1 director. Is Pembroke looking to let these people take their early summertime off or go on to unemployment because we're not needing that many staff? Or is that something for, I was going to save it for the next meeting, but the problem is that's 2 more weeks from now and this could be a potential savings.
Are you still there?
Yeah, is that something you want to add to the agenda for tonight?
Yeah, I was asking to see, the residents are looking to see, on the outside, it looks like, the school's closed, nobody's doing any work, which is not true. But this is one of the questions that the residents asked. So I didn't know if this would be something that would be discussed this evening or if it's something that's for non-public.
I don't know if that needs to be non-public. Patty, is there a short answer to the question of could there be cost savings on food service staff that's not currently?
They have not been cut at this point. They would end early on, when I forget what the last day is now, but the first week of June, unless the board wanted to add this as an agenda and make a separate decision about it. We're paying our staff right now, our hourly staff.
Andy, can I make a comment?
Sure.
So I'm just reminding myself what we decided on our March 17th meeting, and the motion was to compensate hourly employees at their regular hourly rate through April 3rd when schools reopen, ha 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 ha, or 4/10, whichever date is later, and that motion was made and carried. So it sounds like we might be overdue to make a decision on this. If the decision came to us at that meeting and our decision only carried through 4/10, it sounds, Patty, like that's it's already been put into the works that they're being paid, but it does seem like maybe we need a board decision on this. My perspective on it is that I would be in favor of paying these folks through the scheduled last day of school or whenever they would have been paid through. I don't know enough about the system to know whether they're paid for the week after because there's, follow-on tasks or what have you.
I think the other side of the coin we could look at too is if we are overdue to make a decision on that, would these people benefit from going on unemployment at this point in time?
And my thoughts on this situation is that we're showing the residents that we are cognitive of the situation that we are in, the taxpayers are in, the employees are in, and also what Jean said, we may benefit for the cost of the extra amount that unemployment is actually giving out at the moment. So they move off better, but it also looks to the residents that we are trying to save.
This is April. I'm a little lost. We made a motion to pay hourly employees, non-certified staff, through 410, which is what it ended up being. I believe I heard our superintendent say those people are being paid, but that's not actually what the board approved. And that is a concern of mine, that these people may be being paid when that is not an action that was taken to pay our non-certified hourly staff after 410.
Sorry, I'm just going back and looking at minutes.
Andy, again, forgive me if this just isn't the way this board works, but is it possible to schedule a special meeting for a half an hour next Tuesday where we can tackle this with fresh eyes and have Patty get us a little bit of information between now and then? It does seem time sensitive, but I mean, this honestly, just as we're all getting to know each other, this is an hour and a half past my bedtime.
Yeah, that's kind of how I'm feeling too. I don't know. I guess what I can do, if it's okay, Patty, if you don't have an objection from some sort of RSA standpoint that I'm not thinking of, I could put together a poll for days for next week that we could possibly have a short meeting regarding this one specific thing. I'm not comfortable making any sort of decision on it tonight without a whole lot more understanding of what's going on with unemployment right now and all that stuff. So I don't think I have anything terribly constructive to add to the discussion. So I would definitely like some time to sit on it, as much as I do not want to schedule another meeting. I also understand that waiting 2 weeks may not be the best thing to do. Thoughts from everybody?
One quick question, Patty. Is it the same 3 staff members?
I don't know that. I would need to get that information.
Yeah, I mean, if they're rotating through.
This is April. I just want to state that I agree with Amy about having another meeting. It is getting late. It is time sensitive. I'm also concerned about if we were to take action at this moment, how we as a board may look kind of shady that right before adjournment, we took up something when most of the people who were attending the meeting are not here.
Yeah, and I think that's an important point, April. I think, and maybe this is on me as the chair, but I think we need to do a better job sticking to our agendas. This was not on the agenda. I think that in the future we need to, I think we're at the point now, hopefully, where things are stabilizing a little bit. We can include a couple of non-absolutely urgent essential things on the agenda each week. And I'll make an effort to do that. But I think we need to stick better to what is on our agendas. There's definitely, I don't think there's reason that we need to be on these meetings until after 10 o'clock. And, so I agree with that sentiment for both our own sanity and for transparency with the community. We publish an agenda specifically specifically so that people know what's going on. And I agree with April that having a discussion of this magnitude while nobody else is on the phone is probably not the most transparent thing to do. But it's also an important issue, so we do need to circle back to it.
Andy, this is April again. Did I hear you say earlier in tonight's meeting that there was a directive that going forward, agenda review will be on future agendas?
There was not, but I'm going to make that request to Kathy.
Thank you. That would give all of us an opportunity to speak up at the beginning of the meeting. So thank you.
Andy, do you want to choose a date now while everyone's here and we can make
Does
sure
everybody
people
have
are
their
available?
calendar, Sandy? I'm working like a ton of overtime this month at all of the different emergency centers, so I'm going to be somewhat limited.
And we could, some of the districts are doing morning meetings as well. You know, I don't know what everyone's schedule is like, but we can certainly consider that.
Andy, this is Amy. Just so you're aware of my schedule, it is pretty wide open. So with 3 to 5 days notice, I'm pretty much good morning, noon, or night. Not so good after 10.
I hear that. I'm
On Monday the 11th, I'm going to be taking the school board conference or workshop, and maybe Amy signed up for that one too instead of going today.
Yep, I'm working on Monday also at night. I think I currently, let me double check. I think I currently have Tuesday and Wednesday open next week in the evening. That'll be the 12th and 13th. Do those days work for anybody?
What time are you looking at the 12th? At 6:30, I have to start interviewing for the DPW. So do you have something maybe 5:30, 6 o'clock? Is that doable for anyone?
What does 5:30 on Tuesday look like for folks? Gene, can you get on that early? I know sometimes you're coming from
I'll
work.
be running, screaming in the door, trying to hook up, but yeah, I could do it.
This is Amy. 5:30 on Tuesday works for me. That's prime supper time for the children. So later on Wednesday would work better, but I can totally make Tuesday at 5:30 work.
April, does 5:30 on Tuesday the 12th work for you?
I believe it does, but without consulting my spouse's schedule, I may have little ones around, and it may be difficult to fully attend.
Okay.
We do meet hopefully a short week.
Okay. So Patty, I guess I'll get in contact with you and Kathy about a very abbreviated agenda specifically to talk about paying hourly employees.
Okay.
We'll have to make sure that gets posted and everything. All right, so we'll plan on tentatively the 12th at 5:30. April, if you get a chance to check everything on your end and let me know if that works. It sounds like everybody else is okay for then. And with that, I will make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
This is
a second.
And did you have something you wanted to squeeze in?
Yeah, I'm sorry. Is there any way that we could post the draft minutes? I know that we had a resident that was concerned that the minutes aren't there. We have them in our docs as drafts.
I think if
we'll have to talk about it.
Yeah, if there's something in there that's inaccurate and it goes out.
Can we please put that on the agenda for the next regularly scheduled meeting?
Yep.
All right, I just thought I'd ask.
Yep. No, it's
And I'm with
important.
you. I'd like the draft to go out like the day they're created, but it's not. It's not the time to get into it, I think.
Okay, so we've got a motion and a second for adjournment. Roll call vote. Amy,
Yes.
Ian,
Yes.
April, Dean,
Yes.
and I'm a yes. Thank you, everybody.
Thank
Good
you.
night.
Good night, all.
Good night. Have a great evening. See you, John.